Good afternoon. My name is Alan Nochumson of Nochumson P.C. and I'm here today with Jacob Cooper, partner and managing director of MSC Retail. And first of all, welcome, Jacob.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. So, Jacob, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll deep dive into the state of retail during COVID-19.
Sure. Thanks again. My name is Jacob Cooper. I'm a partner at MSC Retail. We are a retail and restaurant advisory services firm based here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we also have offices out in Los Angeles and in New York City. Our primary focus as a commercial real estate brokerage is to bring retailers and restaurateurs together, mostly for leasing and sales transactions. We also work with hospitality clients like hotels. We also work on college campuses across the country via a division we call MSC University, which helps student housing developers and other retailers strategize and focus on proliferating on those college campuses and universities. So we are, my primary focus is here in Philadelphia, but we are a national company. And it's good to have some perspective during these difficult times.
Yeah, myself as one person, I know that you work with a lot of interesting and noteworthy landlords and tenants in town. So let's just get to the gist of it. Like, what's going on in retail right now?
So our business is going through a challenging moment right now. The past few weeks have been very, very difficult for many of the street-facing retailers and restaurants that have had to lay off a significant amount of their employees. You've seen some of the challenges, especially in the restaurant world, with those restaurateurs having to drastically adjust their business models within a split second to pick up and delivery. Some restaurants have had to close just because they haven't been able to survive with that model. Retail, there are some glimmers of hope in the retail world. Obviously, the retailers that are open, like grocery or pharmacy, are doing very well. It's a challenging time because they've had to streamline their back end product delivery systems and all of those things to keep the shelves stocked for surging demand. So while there may be higher volume in those stores, it's still very challenging. But overall, many of the stores, if you would walk in across the city, are unfortunately closed, and they're going to be closed for the time being until probably for the next 30, 60, 90 days until we emerge. So it's a challenging time. A lot of the discussions in our industry, both locally and nationally, have been how landlords and tenants are actually going to work collaboratively to get through this process, either via rent deferrals or abatements. So we're thinking and assisting our clients with helping them strategize through this difficult time and how to restructure leases to get them through this period.
So like, what are some of the options you're seeing about, like, either rent deferrals or abatements that are going on, and are they industry specific?
Across both retail and restaurant worlds, we've seen tenants request anywhere from 1 month to 4 to 5 months of rent deferral, which is not complete abatement, but defer to a later time. Those can be, we're seeing occasionally that rent be tacked on to the end of the lease via additional months of rent that are paid at the conclusion of the lease, or we're seeing that the total deferred amount being amortized perhaps over a certain period of time when we're past this, when every business is up and running, hopefully at a point when tenants can pay just a little bit more each month to repay the total amount deferred. In order for landlords and tenants to be cooperative, though, we're finding that landlords are also having those conversations with their lenders and those lenders are requiring some additional information from landlords and therefore from tenants to move through this period. So it's that exchange of information and that communication that's taking these few weeks, and it's a difficult time to wade through that. But we're seeing, for the most part, many landlords and tenants engaging in extremely cooperative conversations, which is actually, I think, one positive of the situation.
So how are the landlords, like, or I guess how are the mortgage lenders reacting to the landlord's demands for either forbearance or some type of delayed payments on their mortgages?
Sure. From the conversations that I'm having, many lenders are being cooperative. As I mentioned, there are some additional pieces of information that are being requested of tenants, like sales information, guarantor information, and other things that are a little bit extraordinary and aren't typical requests from lenders, or lenders to landlords, to extract from the tenants. But these are extraordinary times, so there's that, again, that just exchange of information. But for the most part, I'm finding that most parties in the commercial real estate world are being collaborative and cooperative.
All right. Or is there any difference in how people are dealing with each other, whether it's a lease in Center City, in Fishtown, in any other neighborhood or commercial corridor?
So I would say most of the landlords out in the commercial corridors are mom and pop landlords, right? And they may depend, either they don't have as much debt on a property as a typical commercial landlord would be. They live off the cash flow, in which case this is, they don't have a lender to report to, and the rent deferral is really money out of their pocket on a month-to-month basis, which can be difficult. If they do have some ability to defer that rent, I'm finding that is happening. If you are an owner of commercial real estate, even out in the neighborhoods, hopefully you do have some, rainy day fund, or you do have some cushion to allow for your tenants to defer rent on a short period of time. There will, I'd say, on a national level, in larger perhaps malls or even grocery anchored shopping centers, where if you're an owner of a grocery anchored shopping center in a typical suburban location, and if your market and your pharmacy may be open, but all of our inline shops may be closed and not paying rent, and that could put some significant burden on obviously your cash flow, but also your loan covenants. And this is going to be a very tricky time for those more traditional suburban retail owners that may not have the ability to let go of monthly cash flow. So this is what everything's changing again on a week to week and month to month basis. And there's no doubt that the end result of this, which I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to talk about, is what happens to the retail industry in general. And I think the collateral damage is unfortunately going to be a lot of the smaller shops, a lot of the retailers and the restaurants that didn't have a significant amount of money to hold them through difficult times. A lot of those tenants will be closing, and resulting in more empty space and more supply in the market.
And actually, that was going to be my next question. So where do you see business going, say, if we're closed a month, 2 months, 3 months? Like, how many vacancies do you think we'll have in Center City and in the surrounding neighborhoods?
Well, there's unfortunately no way to tell. And some of the strongest retailers or strongest tenants on the ground floor that you've seen may be the ones that are going to be the quickest to close. It's not just this crisis that would have caused that. It would have been perhaps an upcoming lease expiration or an upcoming lease option, where the tenant was thinking about renewing and thinking about injecting some capital into their space via a renovation. Now they may not have that money to do so, and they may end up closing up. There may be other opportunities or other situations where a retail tenant, again, maybe coming up on an option at a fixed rent, and that tenant may use this time to think about maybe even a relocation. So that could shift the market. It's not going to be adding demand into it, but if you were thinking about an upcoming option at a $35 rent, but you now believe that the market has shifted down to a $25 rent, there are going to be these opportunities for renegotiation, especially for tenants. So from a landlord perspective, added supply is never a good thing because it typically drives down rents, and that will drive down rents, I think, across the board in Center City, especially on the highest value streets, where rents got up to 150, 200, even $250 a foot. That change, I think, is going to be less apparent out in the commercial corridors where rents were not as inflated and supply perhaps wasn't as large. But there's no doubt there are going to be some impactful fundamental changes to our marketplace. And as a generalization, I would say there's going to be more space, rents will be cheaper, and we're going to be moving into a market where tenants are going to have a strategic advantage with negotiation. Again, if you're coming out of this crisis, if you are a capitalized tenant and you are have a desire to capitalize on the environment, you're going to be able to get better space for cheaper. It's a lot of the same things happen in the market post 2008, where tenants were able to just reposition at a much lower rate and really lock in long-term commercial leases in this tenant-friendly market at lower rates. So it will be a tenant's market. So I think that's the global definition. I would say, as it relates to Philadelphia, Center City, we're lucky in Center City that we don't have a sprawling downtown core. So it means that we don't have a ton of space. So I think our recovery, in much the same way that our recovery in 2008 was shorter than other major metros, I would anticipate that it's going to be shorter here, just because we have less space and it's just more competitive. We have a smaller Center City here. There are higher value streets and smaller amounts of higher value streets, and I'm hoping that we have a tenant base that can fill that in sooner rather than later.
Well, can we actually spin this into a positive, where maybe because of who we are and how we're set up in Philadelphia, where we may be more competitive than like cities like New York City, for instance, that has really taken a hit during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure. When somebody asks me what the greatest strength of Philadelphia is and why I do business here and why the real estate market is strong here and consistently strong, I say it's my answer is the relative affordability compared to New York, DC, and Boston. And you've seen that really play out with a lot of the brain drain that happened, I guess, in the early 90s and early 2000s. That metric has really flipped, and we've been able to retain a lot of the young talent here in Philadelphia because of the affordability, especially out in the neighborhoods and with our apartment rents comparatively. I think you're going to see a lot of that shift happen out of this crisis in the retail and restaurant world as well, and maybe in the commercial world and the office world as well, where you're going to see a lot of companies, a lot of retailers, a lot of restaurateurs, namely from, let's talk about New York. I mean, New York is going through the worst of it, I think, in this country right now, and there are going to be a lot of businesses that look to Philadelphia as a safe, more affordable alternative to restarting their business, and that's going to be, I'm hopeful, a good thing for our city. It's we never like to be too welcoming to New Yorkers, but in these days, we've seen a lot of the growth in Philadelphia from folks outside of the city, which is somewhat refreshing. And I think that we should have our arms open to those businesses, those people that are choosing to move here from out of town.
Yeah. Well, someone who was born and raised in New York and has lived here for 20 years, I would have to say that Philadelphia has been very welcoming to me.
That's good. That's good.
So I don't tell a lot of people I'm from New York because usually then they have a scowl on their face. But I actually think of myself as a Philadelphian now.
As long as you don't wear a New York Giants jersey to the link.
I'm a Jets.
Yeah.
Well, I
Jets fan.
raised a Jets fan, but I raised my kids as Philadelphia Eagles and the other teams as well. So, all right. So we're talking about opportunities for Philadelphia going forward. So what are the impacts on the businesses like the retail and the restaurants that you're going to see? Like, how are those businesses going to change because of this crisis?
Right. So there's no doubt that every business has had to rethink their business model and in a very, very short time. And the retail and the restaurant world are certainly no different. I would say retail was already an industry. Our industry was already, I would say, going through not growing pains, but shrinking pains, right? Every year there's been a year-over-year growth of online sales. The pressures on brick and mortar are pretty widely known. And generally there was an excess of square footage, an excess of space in our country compared to the demand. You've seen retail bankruptcies amplify and accelerate every year. And some of the legacy retailers in our world, in our industry, like Gap, like J. Crew, like Banana Republic, especially in the apparel world, are going to go through continued pressured times. And my guess is many of them will not survive this or will not be around in the next few years. So the question then becomes, okay, who replaces them? And that's an important question. I haven't seen a significant amount of either mom and pop entrepreneurship or national level retailing in terms of square footage that's going to replace all of this space and all of this supply. So we need to figure out a way for how the commercial real estate market shifts and how a lot of this excess retail space is going to be eaten up. I think in the downtown cores of cities, and again, my focus is primarily Center City, Philadelphia, I would say we have big chunks of space now. We had that before this crisis, and my guess is that there's going to be more after this crisis. And some of the industries that we've seen filling in space are obviously large format food and beverage, large format entertainment, medical space, and that could be urgent care, it could be office space. There's going to be other uses that are going to fill in, probably not appropriate for some of our typical high street shopping streets like Walnut Street. But you may see some of the second floor spaces on Walnut Street convert to office space because right now we don't really have 2-level or 3-level retailers out there that are comfortable with merchandising on multiple levels. So additionally, you're going to see some of the large format retail space shifting from primarily front of house consumer facing space to smaller showrooms that customers and consumers are able to engage in and walk in off the street, but perhaps most of the space inside of their store may shift to back of house and may convert to either delivery opportunities or pick up and drop off for merchandise or repair. So you already saw that, for example, Apple on the 1600 block of Walnut Street. Many people don't know, but Apple has only retails out of about 40% of that whole building. The rest of it is back of house and repair and training for their employees. The entire second floor is not consumer facing. So you're going to see more of that. In the restaurant world, again, a lot of restaurateurs have had to immediately rethink their business models, and some of the changes in the near term are obviously going to be a shift toward delivery and pickup. The problem is in cities and in typical restaurants, a lot of these permanent fixtures and permanent build outs, they're not built for those types of operations, right? Many restaurants are built as they're built as restaurants. They're built as wonderful places to engage with other customers and guests, but they may not have a takeout window. They may not have an easy way for loading or for pickup that can, take food directly from the kitchen to the front door or the back door. So restaurateurs are going to have to immediately rethink that, and you've seen a lot of that shift with either delivery or obviously pickup. But I think I think more importantly, a lot of them are thinking about how to engage with the consumer, engage with the customer. Typically, I would say during weekdays, which I've found most interesting. A lot of us are rethinking how we cook for our families Sunday through Thursday. And even though we can't go out to dinner, most people go out to dinner Friday, Saturday night, maybe Thursday night. The restaurants are typically full during those days, especially in Philadelphia. But the key is how restaurants are going to fill their spaces on weekdays. And maybe the answer is that they're not going to be filling their spaces on those days. They're going to have to figure out a way for their food to get into homes. And that may be with cooking channels or delivery or pickup or meals that are prepared. So you as a customer can feel, you can identify with the brand and identify with the restaurant, but maybe via a different channel, not sitting in their stores.
We were talking before this call or discussion about the cook and solo model, where they have Zahav, and then they have different restaurants that are more casual, that are different versions of Zahav, which you can eat for lunch or a quick dinner. And do you see like the restaurateurs kind of going towards that model, where you may have the fancy schmancy Zahav, where you want to go out, nice dinner, special occasions, but then, to make the money during lunchtime or the weekdays, or, at night during those Sunday through Thursdays, do you see a lot of restaurateurs kind of opening up those type of like Marcas or
Yep.
Federal Donuts or Dizengoffs of the world?
I think Steve and Mike they've shown that they've had success across the board. Many chefs, many restaurateurs like to have the premier, or call it white tablecloth experience. And for Steve and Mike, I think it is Zahav. For others, it could be, for Michael Schulson, it could be Alpen Rose, or it could be Giuseppe and Son, something more elevated than a typical kind of takeout delivery model. But you've certainly seen a lot of restaurateurs experiment with the smaller format spaces, like you mentioned, which are high volume, typically lower cost across the board, lower labor costs, lower build out costs, lower rents comparatively on a gross basis, but higher profit margin, right? Higher profit percentage. So, my friend Chef Kevin Spraga has also experimented with kind of a takeout model. He's currently working on a fried chicken concept, but there are many of them out across the country, where you have an established chef or restaurant group trying to experiment in the takeout realm. I would say, to answer your question, yes, a lot of chefs, a lot of restaurateurs are thinking about, and they should think about, smaller menus where ingredient costs, food costs are smaller. And maybe, I typically see this when you walk around Europe, you may see a weekend menu that's a little bit, that's larger, or a weekday daytime or weekday evening menu that's a little bit more shorter, where they can keep costs down during those days. And I think that model's, I'm already seeing that out right now in the marketplace. And even in the past 3 weeks, where a lot of restaurants have had to look at their menus, look at their ingredient lists, and really shrink it down. And I think that's actually a good thing for the consumer. More choices aren't necessarily better. I think we as humans, we as restaurant guests sometimes like less choices. And you also see that from Steve and Mike's concepts, Marcaz and Dizengoff, Goldie. The menus, whatever it is, 5, 6, 7 items long. It's not an encyclopedia like Cheesecake Factory, for example,
Yeah.
who's going through a very difficult time. That's just that model's, I think, going away.
Now, you were mentioning deliveries for restaurants. Do you think what are they going to do? Leverage Caviar, Grubhub, or do you think they're going to do their own deliveries?
Well, the delivery model, I think, is again in urban cores like Philadelphia, where you don't have loading and drop, a prototypical loading and drop off, where you may have in a typical suburban setting. It is very, very difficult to operationally to run that business. So a trend that we were tracking prior to this crisis, but I think is going to no doubt amplify and accelerate, is the off-premise catering kitchen, or off-premise what they call ghost kitchens, which are essentially commercial kitchens that are outside or not together with the main restaurant, but they may be in other perhaps less dense areas of the city, but where loading and parking are a little bit easier. And for example, those streets could be Washington Avenue or Delaware Avenue in Philadelphia that are bigger streets, but still relatively accessible to the core of the city. And there are groups that have already started buying real estate and fitting out real estate as large scale commercial kitchens where a restaurateur or a food service provider in the core of the city could rent out a small little sliver, a little portion of that commercial kitchen and run a delivery model out of that off-premise location. So the whole operation can run more seamlessly. So the operations inside of the restaurant, that can be purely customer facing. The chefs there can really focus on the guest experience there. But if you're Alan sitting on your couch watching the Jets game, and you can order wings and pizza from either Grubhub or maybe their own proprietary delivery system, that food may in fact come from the ghost kitchen, the off-premise kitchen, rather than the restaurant that you thought you were ordering from. Now, everything's going to be streamlined. Your experience as the customer via the delivery app, and the food and the recipes, it's all going to be the same, but the food's going to be coming from a different place. So again, in Philadelphia, where real estate is relatively difficult to find, that type of real estate is really difficult to find. We don't have big malls and big sprawling cores like Atlanta or Las Vegas or Austin maybe. It's just a little bit more difficult to find those spaces in Philadelphia, but I think that's where things are going. And I think overall, it's going to allow restaurants to perform better within their four walls, but also get food and get their menu and experience and brand into the homes of their guests in a more seamless manner.
So it's kind of like the GoPuff model that we were talking about before our discussion, where GoPuff, they choose satellite locations in different neighborhoods, and then the consumer purchases those items on the GoPuff app or website, and then the deliveries are made locally within those neighborhoods.
That's correct. So GoPuff's model from a real estate perspective is locating small warehouses across the whole country, but strategically within urban cores. And they place those based on their own proprietary software, based on drive times and density and all of that stuff that goes into their formula. But it allows them to gain access to a majority of customers. And yes, I think that's a very similar model where there may be these ghost kitchens strategically placed across the city, one in the Northwest that's servicing Mount Airy and Chestnut Hill, one in the Northeast that's serving Fishtown and Kensington and Northern Liberties, one in South Philly. So we're moving in that direction. Absolutely.
So we can see a situation where Star Restaurant Group has one site and all of the best of like whatever their restaurant is, and then you'll have a menu and you can choose whatever you would like. Best of.
I think it's possible. I think anything's possible.
All right. Well, I mean, I think that's it basically. Is there anything else you think we missed that, in terms of what others should know about the future of the retail industry in Philadelphia?
Well, I would say obviously that this is a very difficult time for the world, for um, any business that is customer facing. I think is finding that this is particularly um, it's just devastating, and on a day-to-day basis, it's hard to see those businesses go through this difficult time. But I would say, we're going to emerge from this no doubt stronger, and it's going to be a time of recorrection in our industry, where if you, as I mentioned before, if you are smart, if you are capitalized, and you're thinking well into the future, it's going to be a time of great opportunity, and that's where we can help our clients think about that long-term business planning, and especially identify opportunities out in the market that may not they just weren't available even 90 days ago or 60 days ago, where in retrospect we had peaked in terms of the commercial real estate market. But this correction is going to be a very interesting time, and no doubt again a time of opportunity, and for across all commercial real estate, including people like yourself. Things are changing on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, so it's going to be an interesting ride.
So if someone wanted to reach out to you, someone who's a landlord who is trying to figure out the tenant, or looking for new tenants, or a tenant
Sure.
who's looking to work with their landlord, or someone who's just looking to buy a building, or like put a new business in a building, how can they reach you?
So you can find us at our website at www.mscretail.com, and we're happy to help in any situation. If you're a landlord right now that doesn't know what to do with an existing tenant and you have questions, I'm more than happy to talk to you. If you're a tenant that's thinking about a relocation, or thinking about closing, or even shutting down or reopening later in the year, please reach out to us. We can help you think through these short and long-term business planning as it relates to your commercial real estate and your real estate holdings in general. And again, this is a time to think strategically and thinking long-term and repositioning your own business. So we're more than happy to help. Again, www.mscretail.com.
All right. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
All right. Have a great day.
Take care.